if you run into a 12-year-old in like Fortnite, they're like, "You're old, you're creepy," and I'm kind of going, "Who do you think wrote the code?"
Well, to be fair, you're saying creepy things. Like if you're whispering your ASMR, I'm going to get you. They're going to say you're creepy anyways.
You're a really old school gentleman, JM. I'm very impressed,
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland Volt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlinson.
Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. It's been one heck of a week here in Toronto with a combination of heat and rain that makes it really muggy, but I don't mind it. That's nice warm showers and a little bit of clearing of the skies afterwards. I appreciate that. How have you been, my friend? I know you've been on an adventure.
Yeah, well, kind of. I'm tired because just 2 days ago I came back from the fatherland, so I had 2 wonderful weeks moving my younger son from one town in Germany across country to the other town, and we visited my older son in Vienna, and I'm ready for a vacation. Those 2 weeks were anything but. But I'm back now. I'm back, and maybe as a follow-up to our latest episode, on Saturday I get my Airstream trailer, so I'm all excited.
Excitement.
So that means it's the perfect segue to the topic of our show today. Because A, I feel old, and B, I buy a trailer that only retirees buy. And that brings us to the absolute topic of today, where we have a wonderful guest, Peggy McCann, who, as a young chicken, obviously doesn't know anything about retirement and all that type of stuff. But nevertheless, we're going to talk with her about. Welcome
to the show, Peggy McCann. Yay!
You finally convinced me to come and join your levity.
Aww. We have a good time. So today's topic, just to put it in specific terms, is about knowledge management in the context of staged retirement. And I know this is particularly relevant to IT, where there's a lot of knowledge accumulated across a large number of employees who've been working for you for a long time, and letting it all go to waste seems like a little bit of a bad way of operating your business. But before we get into the topic today, a good friend of ours, Miss Peggy, tell us a little bit more about yourself. So first, let's start with the bona fides. Who are you and what do you do for a living? What has been your professional career that got you there?
Well, presently, I am a customer success manager at Software AG for the AIRS product. Prior lives, and I can put it bluntly, was a real go-getter when I was younger, multiple jobs, multiple businesses, was very interested in the arts and art-related professions. I worked for museums. I worked for concert halls. I was educated as an accountant, hit the Y2K bubble, became, I had these wonderful people from a company called ICS go, if you know business, we know SAP, we will teach you SAP. It was when they were first rolling out SAP to the United States. So I became a CO consultant for ICS at that time, which evolved to working for Deloitte, which evolved working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, which led me to working all over the world, and then back again and landed back here at Software AG as a PS consultant for a while, and then moved into a customer success role. So that's what I have been doing for the last couple of years.
I see. Well, you've seen a lot of different scenarios.
I've seen a lot.
I think you mentioned to me, we talked about you did some work on the Falkland Islands, which is like Russia. That must have been a very interesting consulting time.
Yep, I did. And that was one of the early days of when I got involved in AIRS in about 1997. So we were working on a joint venture between Royal Dutch Shell, Marathon Oil, and Sakhalin Energy, and the Russian Federation. So it was incredible. There was equipment from the United States coming in, just, you want to talk about like a global joint venture project. But we were using, AIRS was there with That was back in the days when AIRS was transaction based with SAP. Anybody who's been around AIRS for any number of years will remember, the old transaction based, but those were early days of security and controls. And, it's just like the ever evolving industry. And I know JM and you and I have had conversations around this. Like, a lot of this technology is 30, 40 years old, still around, still being used in a lot of places. A lot of the brain trust is now, as Roland aptly puts it, he's got his Airstream. He's planning his retirement, planning to take off. But we have the history. We're the historians for where all this source code went. And I've heard so many stories, and I see it even working with my customer accounts now, where we have a retiring group of technology people who have the knowledge, who have the history, who were the leaders in innovating. It's like, yeah, technology always wants to innovate, but you have to have that history lesson.
And just to set the record straight, I'm not thinking about retirement tomorrow. I'm thinking about doing that digital nomad thing, which is a different topic, maybe for a future show when I got a couple of miles under my belt and a couple of episodes being recorded. But Peggy, before we go into the topic, because I think it is a topic, especially when you have people of our age, who are actively thinking about retirement. And I have to admit, it's not too far away from me as well, But the surprise for all of our younger listeners, even old people do have bucket list items and think about, what are life goals and hobbies and interests. So, Peggy, maybe you can give us a little glimpse on what of those items are for you before we go into, obviously, the main topic of the show.
And I know the topic has come up from time to time in my circles, Roland. They keep asking me if I'm retiring, and I'm like, I'm too young yet. I have no plans for at least a decade, God willing, health-wise. But bucket list items, man, there's traveling things. My husband and I, we have done a lot of genealogy research, and our families are both from Ireland, from Germany, and it's we've traced things back to villages and towns. And I think for us, it's like we're at a point where we would like to go, and go to those places. Not so much, a lot of our travel's always been business related. This would just be more for us, and more personal related, where, doing those things. There's a few, like Bali is a place I've always wanted to go. Like, I have a bucket list of travel that I want to do. But right now, my kids are at the age where they're starting to get out on their own, start their own lives. I have my oldest son is engaged to be married, so we're looking at wedding planning and all of those things. So I'm sitting there with visions of becoming grandma somewhere in the near future. Maybe not. I don't, whatever they choose. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's no root cause relationship between getting kids and being married. Those times are over.
For me, I'm just at a point where bucket list is not, I don't know. There's still things that I want to challenge in life. I don't feel like a bucket list to me is like, you've kind of accepted that you're nearing the end and this is the last hurrah. I'm still on the adventure. I'm like, there's no end in sight. It's like whatever comes up next tomorrow, and I think, working in a tech space or working in innovative spaces, you have to have a certain level of adventure always, because it is constantly changing. If you are somebody who is routine based and likes that constant, steady consistency, then you don't generally are working in tech. You're working in some other field that's very stable.
You're doomed if you do that in tech, because other people will pass you left and right, like on the Autobahn, and you're driving the little smart car.
It seems like you've had a couple of amazing experiences, a few amazing experiences, and a lot of things to look forward to. But I want to connect it all together. So today's topics is all about knowledge retention in staged retirement. So Peggy, let's start by talking about what the situation is. We like to sort of talk about the why, the how, but let's start with the why. What is the situation with the research you've seen, and how are people being retired or choosing retirement in a typical model, particularly in the tech workforce, particularly in the last 10 years?
Okay, so this gets to be kind of loaded. With the tech industry, like any other maturing business model, you've had a lot of players out in the field. We've seen it. You go through a lot of consolidations, a lot of buyouts, a lot of merging, a lot of melding. And what's happening in the process is the people who fundamentally were there in the beginning, the ones who have developed code structures, the ones who have developed platform structures, they were retained for a period of time. They're kept on as maybe an advisor for a little bit, but then they kind of disappear. And then what I'm seeing from the role I'm in now as a CSM is the senior people who know the internal systems and processes, because a corporation, a commercial corporation, not necessarily a tech corporation, has retirement policies where, 65 and out, 20 and out or something. And they're sitting there saying, okay, you're hitting your cap, even though you're not done, and it's sort of that forced, and it's not just a US issue or a Canadian issue. I'm seeing this globally. I've heard stories where Asian countries have a mandatory retirement age and people are working up until. And one of the saddest things that I've witnessed and heard, and JM, I think this is where this episode kind of came from, was when we are looking at these senior people and we're not looking at retirement as a phasing out as so much as a stop and leave. People who get forced into retirement lose their identity. A year later, you're finding out they're either ill, depressed, something. Like everything has completely, a thriving person, a thriving contribution to an organization just kind of completely falls apart because, one, that outgain was never talked about. So when we're looking at it, and it's a double-edged sword, because I have young sons and you have children, Roland, getting started in the world. They're now expecting, my oldest son has a degree in software development. And the biggest challenge he has is an entry-level job for him. He has to have the skill set of a senior person with 10, 15 years behind them. So that person who's walking out the door that they're trying to replace, the demands on the younger people is to be as good or better than that person leaving at an entry level. So it becomes a real challenge.
Yeah, it's not only that, you also have it from the other perspective. You mentioned it, you have people who are, and I'm in my mid-50s, right? So I don't feel old, right? If you ask me how old I feel, I would say 26. I don't look like that. I fully admit it, but it's the mental thing that you have. And when you think about that, if you're, for example, in Germany in your 50s and lose your job, nobody will pick you up because you're too expensive, or you're perceived as old, or whatever. You're not the latest car model that one can buy, with the fancy leather seats and electric engine and whatnot. You're the old guard, and that's a really hard thing for the individual, but also obviously for the organization. And I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that, obviously, in the how part a lot. What organizations can do. So it's a double-edged sword, as you said. You need to make room for the younger kids because they are coming. They have no choice, right? Mm-hmm. But then on the other side, it's also, as you mentioned before, the older guys who, are obsolete in most cases without them doing anything wrong.
So listening to what Roland was saying, there is the word obsolete, but Peggy, talk to me about your experience and the things you've seen and colleagues like you and what their skills and knowledge they bring to the table is. Is it actually obsolete, or what kinds of value does it provide to the company that they are currently working at, or to any other organization?
Okay, this is a pendulum that's swinging. A few years ago, I would say like in the last decade, last 5 or 10 years, the ageism component about what Roland was speaking about, you hit 50s, you try to transition a job, you can't find anything, you're not considered valuable. The pendulum is now swinging into a different direction where businesses are actually finding the skill set that the end of the baby boomers bring to the table is different than what today's kids have experienced. And that experiential data that we retain that is a lived experience that they're never going to have is becoming valuable in the market because businesses in their cycles have to go through certain levers of that. And the youth have had no lanes to, and there's been no elder transfer of knowledge.
That's the movie The Intern. If I think about like where those sorts of examples are found, that's a really great way of starting the conversation.
That was a prime example. He had knowledge, he had working knowledge, he had the humbleness in that, but he brought something to the table in this high-paced, social media driven world that was a counterbalance to help offset and make that business leader more well-rounded, more receptive, more understanding, more comprehending. So older workers have it's not just the knowledge side of it. It's just that been there, done that kind of thing where we go into situations, we don't panic. We can walk into complex problems and scenarios and say, okay, let's break it down. Here's the issues. Here's what needs to be solved. Here's where we need the action plan. We're much more calm in the crisis, and we're better at crisis management because of that background, because of the societal norms that were present when we were coming through versus today.
I think there's also another aspect when you think about it. And I've seen that, and my wife showed me a post a couple of months ago where one of my previous employer, the little audit firm that I worked for, now puts up classes for college graduates that they're going to hire, how to have conversations with real people, making eye contact and how to approach them and all that stuff. So there's still a shift in there as well because they think, oh, technology will solve everything. And I personally found it super uncomfortable when you talk with somebody who doesn't look at you, who doesn't answer, that type of stuff. So the question also is then in that context, well, yes, you have the experience or not on the individual side, but what is the norm, right? What is the acceptable way to interact with each other in the workplace? And then on top of it, you obviously have the knowledge that is needed that by definition is in the heads of the elder worker because they've been there for 20, 30 years. Do you see the same pattern, Peggy, or is that just starting?
The pendulum is starting to swing. Like the view of the older worker is starting to shift. And I think because so many of the baby boomers want to continue to work. They don't want to retire at 65. They don't want to retire at 69. And I think that's where this conversation circles around about we need to rethink what do we mean by retirement? Like you said, you don't really want to retire, but you're going to be more mobile, this nomad type existence. For me, down the road, long term, like I don't mind working. Like I've got all the energy in the world still. I'm like you, Roland. I still think I'm in my 20s. I still act like I'm in my 20s half the time. But, and I want to work as long as I find work enjoyable. But I know at a certain point in time, I'm going to want more time for something else, and right now, the retirement model is one size. That's it. And it's one size does not fit all. And we're not thinking about it, and especially in the tech space. Like I said, I know from customer project teams where, somebody had done, coding in like another, database type structure, had all the knowledge in the world. They forced him into retirement. He had never documented anything. They had no idea what the code that was still running in the company represented, so that when they try to do changes of modernization, there was such a struggle. And because the way the retirement model was built, there was a hostile response when they tried to get that person to come back and help.
Yeah, I've seen that over and over again in like organizations that I work with. I remember I worked with somebody years ago who was a classic example, had worked at a big bank for many, many years as a senior technology project manager, and was retired at the time that they were supposed to be retired, quote unquote, left the business, and then ended up becoming a contractor. Oh, like over and over again, kept getting called back for another round. And it's wasteful in a lot of ways. They could have used a salaried staged approach or something like that to keep them going without having to be a contractor, which I think is a tougher gig than being a salaried employee and having stability and sort of the sameness of the organization, the consistency of organization. But also it's very wasteful for the company, because bringing somebody back as a contractor can be very expensive and it's, I mean, to their benefit in some ways from a financial perspective, but I mean, it feels like a sort of bumpy way to keep the knowledge that you want in-house, because also they weren't really bringing them back for knowledge retention. They were bringing them back for functional purposes. So at no point in time did they ever actually get the knowledge out of their head. They just managed to finish 2 or 3 more projects with them, multi-year projects with them, before they stopped calling him as a contractor, which seems like a bad approach to this. So then the question is, there's a lot of knowledge stored in people's heads, and particularly as you look to phase yourself out of the business. I mean, we talk about typically the idea is retirement is a cutoff, right? Like you stop working on day X, you have a big retirement party, and then you sort of walk into the sunset and never you shall be seen again. That feels, even with planning, that feels like a tremendous loss of organizational capital. Let's just put it as like a financial thing. So talk to me about why organizations should see doing something better as a way of retaining some of the value of their organization.
Oh, wow. This is like a topic we could probably go on for hours and days, and you could bring HR people in on just this component alone, because, and again, I'm going to go back into my accountancy kind of vein. What is the cost? So like, what is the cost of letting somebody, like you say, Roland, they've kind of been with the company a long time. They're kind of up there in pay scale. Retirement is a cost savings from a payroll standpoint. But what is the cost, the loss of the knowledge, if we're not handling a transition to retirement better? What is the cost of the company in trying to train and educate, and then all of the misses and misstarts and misfires with a younger group of employees who maybe the dynamic isn't there, the synergy isn't there with the team, the components kind of fall apart. They don't really quite have the skill set because they don't have that experience. They don't, the don'ts. But there's a cost number associated with that. Is the cost of trying or evolving all these young people with cutting off the older. And this is where I say the pendulum swinging. They're finding out that the cost is too high, because the cost in time to market, the cost in productivity, the cost in, getting actual results that are attached to KPIs is too much.
And I think it's also the young folks don't want to use the old technology, Who wants to do stuff in BASIC or one of those ancient computer programming things that you had to chisel on a slate, Well, anyways, So they obviously want to do something different, right? So I think the biggest challenge that organizations see, and I agree with what you said, Peggy, payroll saving and all that type of stuff, is the lack of understanding how things are wired up. It's the lack of understanding what it actually takes to change not only the organization, the HR aspect, the people aspect, but the underlying technology, the underlying production processes, the knowledge. When I think about financial organizations, the fact that products run for decades there, and you have a legal contract and whatnot, and you just lose that knowledge, and then you're completely surprised when some regulator knocks on your door and says, oh, by the way, you need to do this and this and this, because you don't know what you sold to somebody 20 years ago or 30 years ago, right? And I think this is the big challenge that I see in organizations, that they don't know what they have, who they are, how they operate, and all those things.
There are corporations that are running software that is 30, 40, like the databases that were converted, the whole Y2K nonsense, that noise, that rush because everything was going to crash at the end of the day. And the software developers and everybody else came in, and there wasn't a big disaster there, but it moved technology along. It moved middleware products along. But that sort of back-end, backbone structure for a lot of companies still is there today. What changes and what the young people are attracted to is what I basically call the front office. It's that what you see when you go there, but what's running the engines underneath it is fundamentally still the same stuff. And we're changing the front end on a lot of these things. We're changing front end processes, but the back end of it is still a lot of technology that was built way early on. Okay, we have fresher code. We have code that's more secure. We have code that's more hacker resistant. Okay, so we convert it, but you're still running the same strings. You're still running that same perception. And the people who know it are the people in our generation. They're the people that have started and been here all this time. So yeah, you can, the young people can change the front ends all they want. They can make it look pretty. They can make it, they can gamify it, whatever terminology you want to throw that goes out in the market. But the engines are still, it's like that old V8.
I've seen a cartoon which was like all the applications and stuff like a big pile of Jenga, and at the bottom you see a little brick in there, and that was that one spreadsheet that somebody created whenever in the past, and they're pulling on that little spreadsheet, and everything will just come down.
You even look at it today, like especially like in the process space. How much of us are dealing with customers where we're trying to drive analytics, reporting, and whatever from a data lake? That data lake is now a middle piece that's being fed what? Data from all of the dinosaur systems that they're still using.
Yeah.
So that it is in a single container that you can reference, but we're still using those old systems. You're still using that technology. You're still using those people.
Yeah, because there's no incentive to change it. The old IT truth, never touch a running system, but at some point in time, and Peggy, you work for a company that famously has a non-relational database as one of their main products, where I think 20 years, everybody says, yeah, it's going to die in the next couple of years. And I heard you still make profits from it. So yeah, that's an issue.
I'm thinking about like making the choice that you want to learn new programming languages or draw, like people are talking about, hey, I want to learn Ruby on Rails. That's fantastic. But one of the top ways to make money as a programmer is to learn ABAP, the SAP programming language that was developed in the 1980s. So it's not like these are, and once again, you have people who are working in the 1980s and now it's 40 years later. Those are folks who are at or past retirement age.
Yeah, but Ruby is also old JM,
Yeah.
so 15, 20 years. So,
but still, the point is that you're looking at building a level of knowledge transfer that makes it so that everyone coming in doesn't have to start from nothing, and you can build a whole space that we're going to talk about in the second section that brings people the right level of involvement at the right time. But before the next section, let's turn it back to our audience and think, hey, what do you do in your organization? Or if you're nearing retirement, what are you thinking about for your retirement? And how does that retirement model fit with your workforce dynamic today? And perhaps one you'd like to set up in the future. Is it working? And perhaps could it work better? Should there be a different approach to staged retirement? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our second section, the how.
Love won't let you down, won't let you down. Yeah, hey, I need, hey, yeah, I need your love.
Yeah, welcome back to the second segment of this show. So I think we spoke a lot about retirement and how organizations treat elderly workers and the younger workers that have to push through and all that type of stuff. But I think we all agreed on that the main problem that we see is that we as a society and we as organizations see retirement as a finite event. Peggy, you reach a certain date. Well, back in the day, you got a golden watch, a lukewarm handshake, and a cake. And then you went out of the door and you had to figure out, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life? Which nowadays can be 20, 30 years, thanks to the benefits of good medicine and all those things. So in this segment, I'd like to talk about two things. One is, obviously, I know you have an idea about the whole retirement situation, but I also would love to talk about how organizations can improve and where they drop the ball today and how they can pick up the ball and be better going forward. So maybe the first question is, obviously, Peggy, is the retirement model today. What is the problem from your perspective with that? Oh yeah, there's a certain date and now you can go.
The problem that I see is the employee is not engaged in these employee development plans. An employee development plan should include components for your older workers. So like when you have workers that hit somewhere around just an arbitrary age, say 55, the conversation shouldn't switch to constant growth mode, but more, okay, you're at the pinnacle, you're doing great work. There's not really, if there's something that you want to grow in, you're going to tell me, right? Mm-hmm. If there's something that you want to do that's different or a stretch thing for you, you're going to tell me because you've been at the game long enough. But what I want to know from you, I'm the employer. What do you see your end game looking like? When are you starting to think about what your retirement date's going to look like? What do you want? How would you like to see retirement occur? Do you want the gold watch, the cake, and walk out the door? Do you want to stay engaged in maybe a part, like let's have a negotiation about the second part of your career, about how do you want to phase out? Do you want to work 4 days a week as opposed to 5? Do you want to mentor a couple of days a week where your role is going to shift from being principal to being a driver of the youth and imparting knowledge over, and sort of skilling those people up and being more supervisory to that? Do you want to just keep doing what you're doing, slow down? Like give somebody an option. Like we don't give options. And I think the problem that happens in a tech space, especially when you have a product stack or a company that hyper develops and innovates all the time, that drive to constantly be innovating, the drive to constantly keep pushing is there. But when somebody gets older, say they start having health issues, say they start realizing their mortality, they're sitting there saying, I don't know that I want to do this. But they've contributed a lot to the company. And if the companies care, and this is where we get back into that cost conversation. What's it going to cost the company to not care about their older workers? We're finding in reality, it costs a lot.
Well, it's a huge source of risk for the organization.
Sure.
If the people who don't understand the fundamental underpinnings of the system, I had a conversation with somebody earlier today. A lot of times it feels like people are simply operating tools. They don't know how they work. And just operating a tool doesn't give you the power to truly innovate through that tool. It simply allows you to push the buttons and hope it works. It's the same problem with AI a lot of times. People have no idea how it works. They just assume it's magic. But in the same way, if the people who work at your organization, who you are letting walk out the door, take with them a knowledge of the construction of your product, the very fundamentals of how you do things, particularly for legacy technology companies, you're left with people guessing on how your product works. And that leaves you very at risk.
You have an assumption that I have not seen in a lot of organizations lately. You have the assumption that organizations care. What I've seen in reality is organizations, especially here in North America, who look for the next quarter and not beyond that. It's always like, oh, how do we increase sales? How do we push out more widgets from our production, whatever the metric is, And I think we lost something here, at least here in North America, and I think the rest of the world, it is there or will be there soon as well. We lost something of the responsibility that an organization has. And I don't know how to get this back. How do you change the mindset of an organization?
Literally, corporations are bottom line focused. Like, what's my bottom line? But we've stated it so many times in this conversation, instances where somebody left that had all the knowledge that they had to bring back as a consultant or as a subcontractor or whatever at 5, 10, 15 times the cost of their salary and benefits in order to fulfill something. So there is a cost equation on these things. And risk analysis for any business, human capital cost is a factor. It's not, and the company doesn't have to care about you as the person. You could still be a number on something, but there is a cost value to what you do and what you bring that in order to replace it, the replacement value of that. If you are working in a segment where the technology is literally a dinosaur and it is being phased out, you don't stand a whole lot because it's going to go away. It's going to go away and you're going to go away. But if you are in products, like we've said, there's so many products out there now in the technology space that have been running for 30, 40 years. Yeah, they've modified it, but the guys who've been doing the modification and keeping it current and keeping it fresh are the ones who are nearing retirement. The young guys coming in don't understand all that. They don't understand what happened to that evolution to make it where it is.
So here's my question. So we keep talking about the why, and I think that's really good. And we keep talking about the pitch, which is, you companies do things only ever did for 3 reasons, right?
Right.
Make more, spend less, de-risk the process.
Sure.
This feels a lot like of spend less and de-risk the process, and that's 2 out of 3. That's a pretty good hit. Now let's talk about how we can actually make it happen. So we've talked about this phased retirement, or staged retirement, which is something that's in the title of this episode. Tell me how you would see a staged retirement approach for older workers to retain the knowledge within the organization. That involves knowledge management, also part of the title of this episode, and the sort of way in which you treat them as human beings, but also as valuable resources along the way. So talk to me about a plan.
For me as the worker, it's like I am at a point where, okay, I'm running 80, 90, 100 miles an hour doing what I do. I love what I do. But now I am 62, right? So in like the next 3 to 5 years, I'm sitting there going, do I still want to be running at 100 miles an hour or do I want something different? Because a lot of what I'm about right now is like, I work with my sons, I work with young people, I work with their friends about that transition into adulthood, that transition. So I'm starting to do that sort of knowledge transfer. And we're talking about knowledge management. So when you talk about some of the tech developers, if there has not been a documentation process, if there has not been, some sort of mentoring program of their senior people, we need to start having the conversation about how do I get the essence of everything you've contributed to our products in our company in some capacity, either in recordings, in documentation, in some kind of mentoring program. How do we get that to, and that is a conversation that corporations have to say, there's a value and this is the value, but it is a dialogue. And again, this is getting to, you have to bring the human element in because you have to, as senior leadership and as HR leadership, be willing to go and have the conversation and say, help me build a program. Help me build a different retirement model for our company based on our dynamics, based on our norms, based on our culture, where you can walk away feeling like you contributed to a final product.
And it should be structured, and it should be on purpose.
I think the angle could be slightly different. I would see that situation not as, oh, there's an individual problem that each and every one of us will go through at some point in time, except you're one of the unlucky guys getting a heart attack at work, which hopefully nobody does. But I would use it as an event and say, hey, I see that issue. I see that big parts, and Peggy, you fed our little cheat sheet with statistics and whatnot that we can link to. I see that big wave of a lot of people leaving the workforce and a lot of knowledge working out the door. I would use that as a starting point to say, hey, do we need that old stuff? What is our application landscape? What are our processes? What is our organization? Do we need to continue in those structures that were built 30, 40, 50 years ago and were maybe fit for purpose at that point in time, and then have grown because people, unions, whoever has some beef into that game, they are more thinking about how do I keep the status? So why don't you flip the picture? Why did you say as an organization, I see it, I cannot, for biological or other reasons, I cannot stop this development. Well, why don't I take it as an event to say, maybe I have to rethink what I do as an organization and how I do it. Have you seen that in organizations, or are today's organization not at that point yet?
Again, human capital as a portfolio management piece. I mean, literally, that's what you're describing. It's like this human capital has been the contributors to this part of the application portfolio. So, you can put it in whatever framework, but again, it's baking people into robots. People are human. And it's like, we've got to put the humanity back into the equation with all of this. It's not robotic processing. It's not, okay, so is this something whose time has passed? Do we have something to replace it? Is there some young upshot thing coming in the door that fits the bill of all of the old standards that everybody's used to? You know how difficult change is in an organization? Organizational change is like the toughest thing in the world.
Oh, no. Oh, yes, of course.
But I mean, and so some of this is driving organizational change. So like I said, it is a multidimensional component. But for me, like I said, as a CSM, I've already seen it on a couple of accounts where senior people have left, walked out the door, the knowledge is gone with it, the program is still going, and they did not realize what a key that person was to the program till they were gone. Mm-hmm. Maybe part of this assessment that we're talking about is what happens if I take those people out of the equation? Playing like disaster recovery scenario planning things. What happens if I take this piece out of the equation in my company? What happens?
Well, this means a few different things. The first is you need to understand what your resources contribute to the organization. So that seems like a human resource assessment. The second this that I'm hearing is it seems like there needs to be a structured knowledge capture plan that needs to start early and needs to incorporate the employee's tenure with the organization. If they intend to retire, having these conversations early about starting the mentoring process, starting the knowledge capture process from them in a structured repository so they can outline that. And then this is where I wanted to talk about the next piece of the puzzle is you and I have talked before about how having a retirement day seems like a silly thing to do. Like, all right, after this day, you don't work. So before you're full-time, after you're completely gone. Talk to me about some models you might think would be useful or valuable to both company and to employee for a work reduction schedule.
Well, and that's where, like I said, you can take it back to that employee development plan. You get to a certain stage or age inside your company. And if the average retirement age is, 68, okay, 10 years beforehand at 58, we're going to start talking to you about, okay, what's your income? you are loyal to the company. We value you. We've had this good synergy between us, but now we want you. And a couple of things come to mind for me is HR is really good at presenting things for growth, right? But HR could put together programs for senior workers where they walk in, because a lot of times when I think of retirement and retirement planning, it's always financial. It is not about the other pieces. So why not bring in some sort of like life coach people that will do like a day-long session with the senior staff members that say, hey, have you started thinking about what happens after the day you stop working? Have you started thinking about what do you want that to look like? Have maybe roundtable discussions with senior staff members and HR and the corporation to say, can we come up with some kind of hybrid work? We're doing it now because of COVID with working from home more. Why can't we have some kind of hybrid work model where people start, like senior staff, can still be engaged, can still be active participants in projects and programs, but maybe only 1 or 2 days a week. Okay. Yeah. When we get to the point where you're working half time, we're going to have to talk about a pay cut. So, and again, cost benefit analysis, you're retaining the knowledge, you're getting, it's a win-win for both the employee and the employer, because the employee has reached a point, maybe they get their full retirement benefits and they're able to draw it. They can do that and still earn money. Do they need to have all of that? Is it worth it to them to go to like half pay situation, keep their health benefits or some of the other things? Because, one of the things that I educate young people on all the time, don't just look at the dollar that's in the paycheck. Look at the other components that your employer's paying for and what that cost value is. If you had to do it on your own, 100%, you have to figure that into as part of what your earnings are.
Well, I can tell you something that drives a lot of people towards public service in Canada in particular, where I live, is the promise of a pension. And so even I see people in their 30s and 40s even saying like, I got to get in on these like long-term public service jobs. I can set myself up for life with my pension. That means that they're choosing an employer, and they're even choosing, and you can make some debates about this, but they're choosing generally lower salaries in exchange for the promise of a positive experience as they near the end of the working time that they're choosing to spend within an industry. What if organizations prepared their own version of that are not public service organizations who wanted to compete with the appeal of it? Maybe they could make different choices with how they do pay scales. If you could say near the end of your tenure, you will get a staged retirement package that allows you to leave with the initiatives you've been working on, with people respecting you and the knowledge you've contributed, all the things you want sort of made available to you. I mean, I would find that very appealing.
Jam, we had that. And Peggy and I are in that group that are the first, I try to say it positively, beneficiaries of that big game of the 80s that's called 401k. Skip the damn pensions that organizations give. Now some of them do that voluntarily, so I guess I get the equivalent of 2 pizzas from one of my previous employers every month. But at the end of the day, it was like, no, we make it simple for organizations, make it easier for organizations, and put the burden on the individual. So we will all see if that works out.
And what's really surprising, Roland? Yeah, we are the beneficiaries of the 401k.
Oh, I didn't want to say guinea pigs, but that's what I meant.
One of the things that actually has come out again is the traditional pension model. Is that people are more interested in that pension model versus the 401k as far as longevity with an employer, especially in the United States. And I found it really surprising because it was just something like a week ago. I just saw this article and I haven't had a chance to follow up on it about moving back away from this 401k to this pension model. But, outside of the financial piece of it, I've talked to a couple of people and they were like, I would love to just be able to work maybe 1 or 2 days a week.
Okay.
You know, I don't really want to retire, but I don't want to do this 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You
Mhm.
know, I'll work, 2 days a week. Maybe occasionally I'll cover a week for somebody that goes out on vacation or something like that. But they don't want to completely unplug, because so much of our, I think there's charts everywhere about how much you sleep, how much you work, and how much you free time you have. And with the working model, working from home, people work more than when they didn't.
Yeah.
So you have this work model now where we're working more hours, we're working within a company. So most of our social sphere is with those people. And when you retire, you walk away from it. You walk away from all those people. Like, we just had a 30 plus year person retire here last month.
Yeah.
I would love it if she was there once a week.
It's a great way of helping to bolster the team. And also, here's the thing, like, I just personally, I miss these people, like, it feels weird to just say goodbye and it just suddenly they're gone. And like, it happens a lot of time with people leaving the organization, but here's the truth. Like, there's so much more you can do together. And I really respect, I had the pleasure of being mentored by somebody as he was planning to leave the company. I got to tell you, if I didn't have those 4 months, there would be a whole, like, multiple books full of notes that wouldn't have come about, and I wouldn't be able to do my job the way that I can. So I have personally been the beneficiary of really good mentorship, but it wasn't on purpose. Like, it wasn't an organizational imperative. It was just good people trying their best to help each other out where there wasn't a structure in place. So this is a lesson for a lot of folks out there listening. Think about the policies and programs you have for retirement and where they have fallen short. And think about in your mind, what do you want from the last days of your employment tenure? How would you like to give back? What would you want from other people's final days of employment tenure with your organization? How would you see them giving back and contributing to the organization in ways that help you to achieve your goals and de-risk the process with the knowledge they've accumulated? We'll leave you for one last break before we come back with our final thoughts and conclusions for the episode.
I won't come, something coming over. I won't come like something coming over me. I won't come like something coming over me. I won't come like something coming over me. Something coming over. Give it everything, 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 'cause
And welcome back. Very interesting conversation, Peggy. And I think we looked at it from different angles. We looked at the problem that organizations have with people who are retire or for whatever reason leave the company and how to deal with it. We spoke about the need for organizations to even just talk about and think about that situation. We spoke about what are activities and measures that organizations can do. And obviously, which I found very interesting, not that I'm affected, are things like, okay, how can you design and organize that process of rolling off people, which is what we're actually talking about, at a big scale, baby boomers, hooray, right now. How can we do that in a way that is not only fair for everyone, but also beneficial for everyone? But the big question that I had, and unfortunately I have that unfair advantage that I know you for a couple of years by now, is, well, how can people reach you, Peggy?
Like I said, I'm a customer success manager at Software AG. So you can reach me at Software AG. Jam usually knows where to find me, and so do you. So.
And of course, you can find lots more about the show and all the things, including some more information about Peggy, some ideas we talked about today, some of those handy stats at whatsyourbaseline.com. And that is a quick pitch for whatsyourbaseline.com. We have been loving this season. This has been a fantastic season of What's Your Baseline. And thank you for everyone coming along with our 6th season. Roland and I are excited to be working on the 7th already. We have got some really great shows coming up, and we'd love to have you continue to come along on this journey with us. So you can follow along at whatsyourbaseline.com, find out more about the things from this specific episode at whatsyourbaseline.com, baseline.com/episode 72. And of course, you can hit us up with anything you'd like at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com or by commenting on LinkedIn posts and letting us know that you listened to it and what you thought about it. But thank you for listening. And until next time, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
I'm Peggy McCann.
And my name is Roland Wood.
And we will see you in the next one.